we talked about artificial intelligence in threat detection, but now how a possibility for threat prevention as well, maybe. Here's a new way to approach cybersecurity tasks in general, and such maybe generates some virtual helpers on us on the way. And on that, we'll have Michael Price talking, that ZeroFox Chief Technology Officer. Please help us welcome Michael on stage.
Thank you. Hello. How's everybody doing?
Good.
4 p.m., huh? I'll try not to take too much time here. All right. Well, my name is Mike Price, and I'm the CTO, as was mentioned, and I'm going to be talking to you today about how to create a cyberspace operations artificial intelligence avatar or agent. So, nice short talk title for you. How about that? I probably should have used the word agent as opposed to avatar if I wanted to make it a little bit more technically accurate, but I'll walk you through 10 seconds of who I am and really what the point of this presentation is. So my name's Mike, I am the CTO, and I do work for a company called ZeroFox. Is anybody familiar with ZeroFox? Can I see a show of hands for how many people have heard of the company? My goodness. All right, we have thousands of customers. Only one person. All right. Well, then if nothing else, I've accomplished some marketing today. So we're essentially, we think of ourselves as a pioneer in the external cybersecurity space. So we collect information off the internet, we analyze it, and we let our customers know when we find something bad, and we help them respond to it. So kind of like an IPS or an IDS for your internal network, but more for the internet, right? We produce intel, we do some attack surface as well. So that's our focus. We call it external cybersecurity. The presentation today has almost nothing to do with that. This is a research project I've been working on in line with the future-looking aspect of this track here in this room. So we do a lot of media analysis, text, images, audio, video, and we've been doing that for about 10 years, and that's required us to stand up an AI team to get good at leveraging artificial intelligence for classification, for computer vision, for processing of video and audio. And so our team is good at this by necessity. And also because of this, we are forced to track the evolution of AI. As new capabilities come out, we look at them, we roll them into our product. We do better detection for our customers, better response for our customers. Obviously, in late 2022, if I can keep track of time here, ChatGPT popped on the map. World went crazy, basically, I think by January, February 23. And as the CTO, I'm sitting there looking at the situation, and folks are, asking me, is this complete hype, smoke and mirrors, or is it a real thing, basically? And I would say that by March of 23, I had, formed my opinion that I believe that there really is something to, the GPT model that was out at that time, and that we would need to mobilize around it and get much more familiar with it and begin to roll it into our product. That said, my take on it is not so much like, wow, it's a chatbot, and you can ask it stuff, and it gives you answers. What I like about it, and which you'll see incorporated into the presentation today, is the leap forward, I guess, in NLP operations. You can provide it a string, a sentence or something, a prompt, and it can correctly resolve all different forms of a particular question down to no matter how you express that question, it can tell you what question is being asked. So its ability to understand the semantics of prompts is super helpful, or its ability to extract things from questions, like what was mentioned in that question, or what things were mentioned in that question. All of these operations can be performed with high quality at this point, which unlocks a lot of ability to operate on natural language that was difficult in the past. So obviously since then, you've gone on to image, to video, to audio, the combination of these things. And quite coincidentally, OpenAI today announced their speech toolkit that supports conversational voice interfaces that you can now begin to build on as of this day, and this exactly what I'm going to present on completely by accident or curious timing. So I personally am very interested in the idea of how we can build AI agents that we can interact with like coworkers or people, and that we can issue requests to and have them perform work, and that's really what we're going to begin to talk about. I had spent some time about a year ago building a proof of concept that had a video component to it. So this is a person. You would generate an image of a person, and then you would animate that person speaking. You'd speak to them, and they would speak back to you. In today, we'll be walking through a better version of the overall idea, but it will be voice only as opposed to video. So that said, from a future standpoint, my prediction is that in 2 to 4 years from now, you will have a coworker that you contact that is not a real person, but instead is an AI agent. You'll text them, you'll Slack them, you'll voicemail, Zoom them, all these things. And you'll see a person on the other end of the line that sounds like a person, and they'll carry out offensive and defensive tasks. And that's my prediction. Get ready for it. If you don't believe me, that's cool too. So really what I set out to accomplish was to build an agent that I could speak to, that could prompt me for information if needed, and that could conduct commands on my behalf, and that could report results back to me. And so this is an architecture diagram of how the system works. And since I had gone through it once before, I was able to improve upon certain aspects of the system. So across the top, you'll see what I'm describing here is the speech input pipeline. And this is the question of, not so sophisticated at the end of the day, how do I get from somebody saying something to me capturing what they said? And then on the bottom, speech output pipeline, how do I go from something I would like to say back to the user from the text through to the speech delivered to the user? Relatively straightforward. But in the middle, some folks would describe this as an LLM kernel, a semantic kernel. I've used the word controller here. The question is, how do I understand what was said to me, and how do I do something with that information, and then how do I respond to it? So we'll talk about that for a little bit now. So on the input side, there are some interesting challenges. And when I'm keeping tabs on, so to speak, the AI scene, I'm seeing folks just now talking about this, for example. We've had Alexa and Siri for a while that are examples of this basic concept. But when you think about how you use Alexa or Siri, they tend to be relatively brief commands that are stated kind of like one shot. Hey, Alexa, play a song. Hey, Alexa, buy something for me. You don't tend to have sophisticated conversations with many parallel tasks running with things scheduled in the future. Some of these things you can do, but in general, it's more of a one-shot type interaction. Give me directions for this, or point me to a restaurant, for example. And one of the things that Siri and Alexa do that might be overlooked is their ability to recognize that key term. So you essentially have the mic live, and then it's streaming audio in real time, identifying the boundaries of each word, and then determining that you've spoken this particular phrase, which keys the mic to then receive the rest of the command, identify the end of that command, and then do speech to text and process it from there. And it's kind of complicated, to be honest with you. So in the particular case of my experiment, I do a little bit of radio work as a hobby outside of my regular job, and I took a cue from the concept of keying a mic or keying a radio and created a client application that allows me to record audio by pressing a button, speaking, and then pressing the button to stop recording. So it's a hack around this that makes it a little bit easier. In this particular case, I wanted to have high quality capturing of the audio so that I could then do good speech to text after that fact. So I built a command line application on my Mac that uses Swift, that captures from the microphone, and then this audio file is then passed downstream via a queuing system to another piece of the agent's architecture that does speech to text, basically. So some other things that are kind of non-obvious when you begin to get into trying to implement something like an AI avatar that's speech controlled is how you're going to manage input and output. So for example, if you speak to this and it wants to speak back to you, should it wait for you to finish what you're saying? Could it speak over to you? What if you asked it to do something in the future and now it needs to give you some output, but you're presently giving it a command? So you run into some tricky issues when it comes to coordinating audio input and output to your avatar that have to be dealt with as well. Ultimately, you capture some audio, you provide it to speech to text, you get your text, and then you can process it from there. Now, on the speech to text front, this is also an area where folks are beginning to investigate when it comes to these conversational voice interfaces or conversational video interfaces, the issue with latency. So for example, the first problem you would like to solve is maybe understanding that your user is speaking to your agent, that your user has finished their command, now you have the audio and you need to convert it to text. Speech-to-text operations in some implementations can be slow. And so, for example, it can take several seconds depending upon what you're using. If you're using open source software, like off-the-shelf, open source software, it can take a few seconds. Even if you're using some big tech implementations, as I learned through developing this, you will still introduce several seconds of latency in many cases. And so if you're trying to talk to something somewhat naturally and you speak to it and it takes 5 seconds for the thing you said to even get into the queue to be processed, it doesn't feel natural, right? So you have to evaluate all the different options that are out there identify one that maybe has great latency or like low latency, which is ultimately what I ended up doing. I tried a few different implementations. The current OpenAI speech-to-text implementation, which uses something called the Whisper v2 model, is pretty snappy. It's a little, it's not consistent every single time, but maybe you'll get sub-second speech-to-text in most cases, and so it feels quite natural. And then beyond that, one of the issues that you'll run into when you're doing speech-to-text in this particular scenario is that a lot of the language is technical, and so you would say, hey, I'd like to identify some subdomains based on this domain, or could you, brute force something.gov.lv. It won't always understand everything that you're trying to say perfectly well, and so you have to identify the right way to deal with those issues as well. So when you want to get your input then, key your mic, grab your audio, record it to a WAV file in this case, speech-to-text through OpenAI Whisper model. Out comes the thing that the person said. From an output standpoint, then, we're really going to reverse the process, so I won't belabor the point too much, although there are some very cool things that you can take a look at. I'd strongly encourage you to take a look at 11 Labs. It's a lot of fun. So you have your agent, and your agent needs to communicate something back to the user. So some text is generated or produced, and then that needs to be converted back to an audio file, and then it needs to be relayed back to the client running on the Mac in this case and played through the speakers back to the user. So again, I took a look at several text-to-speech implementations, and I would say that things are like cheaper, faster, better on this front. It's easier to find a solution that can generate speech from text very quickly, and the latency is quite low across all the implementations that I tested, so I was very happy with that. And so then the concerns that I dealt with were, for example, I'm exploring Latvian host names and trying to convert the host names or the subdomains into speech. And obviously, these models aren't as well trained on Latvian as they are on English, you know what I'm saying? And so, when you're trying to say, oh, I found this host, it's up, and the subdomain is blah, 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 it doesn't come out quite right. So you have to experiment with ways to, deal with circumstances like that, for example. Ultimately, I did settle. It's not really meant to be a promotion. I have no financial interest in 11 Labs, but they're very well known for their voice cloning capability. They have a real-time voice cloning capability where you upload a 30-second clip of your own voice. You click a button, and then you can generate audio in your own voice that's completely cloned. I did this with my daughter, so I cloned my daughter's voice, and I cloned my mother's voice, and so I can now have my daughter say stuff to me, and I have my mother yell at me. But I did also use a boxing ring announcer voice for this presentation, so I'll show you that in the demo. So you put text into this, it generates the speech for you in WAV file format super quickly, and the voices are super realistic. There's a huge list that you can choose from. You can clone anybody's voice, although you're supposed to have their permission. And then there's also a voice studio you can use to tweak it, so it's quite nice. You relay that back out, you play it on the speaker. And at the end of the day, playing it was no big deal. Again, just coordinating the inputs and the outputs was a consideration. So now we get to sort of the interesting part, which is the question of how can I tell a piece of software to do something related to offensive cyber? And this is one of the things that I found really interesting about the large language models right up front. Is in my mind the way I think of this is the ability to resolve arbitrary inputs to specific things. Like if I want to say, hey dude, I really want to learn about some subdomains for gov.lv, or I've got this target gov.lv, could you tell me about some subdomains? Or hey, give me a target for gov.lv. There's a million different variations on that statement, but it is possible to use a large language model to resolve all those variations down to this person's telling me that they want subdomains for this specific domain, right? And so you can provide a very fluid interface to people where you don't have to memorize command line arguments or anything. You basically just say what you want, and it gets resolved to what it is that you're trying to say, so you can map the semantic meaning down to a particular thing. And so here you will see that what I had done was to say, I get my input text from speech, and then I use a text-to-capability mapper to determine, of the capabilities that I support, which one is being requested, or perhaps none of them, in which case I tell the user, I don't understand your request. Then I use this capability mapping to select, I used a large language model to determine which capability was requested. I select the capability's ID, and then I load up the Python code that is able to perform that capability, which I'll talk about a little bit more here in a second. And the way that this works, you can see, is This is how I describe the capabilities. I have a ping capability. It's a piece of Python code. And I describe it as an operator can use the ping capability to ping a host. I have a port scan capability. Operator can use it to port scan, blah, blah, blah. There are other capabilities I'll show you in a little bit. And then this is my prompt that goes to the large language model. Like, here's the input that I got from the user. Here are some capabilities with their descriptions. Which one did they refer to? Only respond with these identifiers. And so this is how I map any variation on the natural language to the capabilities that I provide or none. And then once a capability has been selected, I have this Python module that I instantiate. I take the same command that was issued to me, I supply it to the capability, and then the capability uses the large language model to parse the arguments out of the natural language. So basically it says, all right, I know that they asked me to ping something, so I load up the ping module, and then I tell the ping module, here's the command, and the ping module uses the large language model to say, cool, what do they want me to ping? So this is the prompt at the top. The text is the host target.foo.bar up? What host needs to be pinged? Respond only with the host, and the large language model returns the target to me, right? But I could have provided any variation on the input, and it would have produced the same output. At this point, the Python module runs the ping command, out comes the results, and then I use this text-to-speech output function to output the text, which goes through the pipeline and results in the audio being played back to the user. So this is just the list of capabilities that I'd implemented in the proof of concept that I built for today. You have text-to-capability mapper at the top. It's capable of mapping to a few things. On the left-hand side, I'd implemented an attack surface identification module. It's obviously something I'm familiar with from my day job. You can provide a voice command to the attack surface identification module where you say, I'd like subdomains or targets that correspond to this domain that I'm interested in. And it will produce a list of the domains, tell you the domain, spell it out, and give you a description of what that domain is for example. So like latvia.gov.lv, this is the main website for the government of Latvia. Education.gov.lv, this is the education website. And so you not only get the list, but you also get the description. And the list of domains is sourced from the LLM, and it uses RAG, so it does a query in real time to produce that list. So it remains current over time, right? There are other ways you could do this, but that's how I'm doing it right now. I implemented a ping module, so I can ping targets based on voice command. I implemented a port scan module so that I can port scan targets to determine which ports are open. And then in this particular case, I created a contrived example of a server with SSH running, and I implemented an SSH brute force module so I can give the command to brute force SSH based on a password list, and it will attempt to log in and let me know. And you can kind of pull all of these things together into sort of a workflow to get into a host that has this particular issue. I think you could probably see how you could pull on this thread and expand upon lots and lots of different modules and lots of different integrations. And somewhere down the path, you would be in a position where you could do a lot more than this. But this is just, again, a proof of concept. So on that front, I'm going to go ahead and try and play this. And I think we have audio. So you'll hear my lovely voice, and you'll hear the agent speaking back to us. So let's give it a shot. And maybe I'll speak to you very quickly about what you're seeing here, too. So don't worry about the upper left. This is the I/O client. So this is running on my Mac. This is what records from the microphone and plays back. This is an API. So every time audio is recorded, it posts the audio to an API, which is what gets it into the pipeline for processing. Otherwise, there are like two threads running here. The other thread is polling the API server to see if there's some audio it needs to play. Up top, we have the speech input worker. And what this does is take any audio that's been captured and convert it to text. And then here we have the speech output worker, which takes any text and converts it to audio. And then here we have the controller, which implements that semantic kernel that does the understanding of what was you were asked to do in the execution of the command and kind of works through input and output and everything else. Moment of truth. No audio. Are we able to put the audio on? Uh-oh. Sure. So has anybody seen something like this before? Or is anybody familiar with the conversational voice or video interface topic? All right. Does anybody have an AI integration that they use at work that is Slack-based or text-based at all? All right. Cool, we got one. Anybody else? All right.
Give me a list of subdomains for the domain foo.bar.
All right, almost there. All right. Try again.
Give me a list of subdomains for the domain foo.bar.
Target.foo.bar. This is a test target intended to be used for demonstrations.
Is the host target.foo.bar up?
The host is up.
Please port scan the host target.foo.bar.
Port scanning target.foo.bar. Port scanning complete. Port 22 is open.
Go ahead and SSH brute force the host target.foo.bar for the lowercase username Mike.
"22 passwords remaining. 21 passwords remaining. 20 passwords remaining. The brute force attempt succeeded. The password is RASPBERRY.
Okay, so there you go. So that's a demo of sort of the whole system working together. You give it some voice commands, it carries out a pretty limited offensive attempt there, guesses a password, and lets you know what the password was. All right. Oh, thank you. Appreciate that. Cool. So I think I'm running right about on time. I think I had about 20 minutes to present, and we're coming up on the 20 minutes with some time left over for Q&A if you've got it. So to bring it all back around, again, AI is a topic of interest. Do a lot of work with it at work, and as part of the day-to-day, always looking for advances in the technology. I think I got these three kind of in the wrong order. Certainly curious about how to integrate these into an avatar and agent. This is a V2 that does a little bit better job of handling the inputs and the outputs with a little bit of a cleaner model for that controller piece and how to integrate capabilities. It's definitely still a POC. I believe that if I put another year into it, that it would be pretty awesome by the time I was done. We'll see if I have the time to do that. And some things that I would have liked to have done that I haven't gotten to yet include the idea of thinking about that controller as kind of like a little operating system, right? You give it commands, primarily because you want it to do something. And so the question is like, do you want to do something synchronously, like I tell it and it does it and talks back? Do I want it to do many things in parallel? Do I want it to do things in the future? So task scheduling, which is like very common to operating systems as well. So in the future, it would be ideal to implement a more formal task management capability within this bot so that it could do lots of different things for you. And then obviously the methods of I/O, the sky's kind of the limit, but it's entirely possible to just take what you've seen here today and do a couple days worth of work and to get to the point where you say, I want you to do attack surface identification on this domain, find all the vulnerabilities that it's got, format it into a CSV file, and email it to me. And it would do that, for example, when you express it only in that way or in any other variation of the theme. So you would be able to combine capabilities and to communicate easily through email or through text message, through Slack and other formats. And over the course of time, you would be able to do more from there. Something else that I'd like to work on is the ability to add support for variables. So it's kind of annoying to have to say like the target, ping the target, port scan the target, brute force the target. Like I should be able to just say the target is this, and then have that stored, and then I can reference that variable by name in other voice commands, and then it would just pick that up, which is also not so hard to do, and something that I expect to add. And then beyond that, the ability to enhance that argument parsing bit. So for example, when I say give me some subdomains, it's like hard-coded to 3. It's going to give me 3 every time. I should be able to tell it like, give me some subdomains, in which case it defaults to a certain number, or I'd like 5 precisely, or the most popular, or the top, or whatever, or associated with this or that. So there's more work to do in that regard. And then beyond that, just to continue to build down the path of, like in my mind, the way I think of it is take everything that comes with a Kali box and build it into this so that you can voice command the system to do all the things that like a Kali could do. And by the end of the day, you would have this agent that's running that has all of these capabilities. And then there's another level beyond this, which is if you incorporate information or intelligence collection. Then you basically say, you know, I found a port that was open, and I got a banner from it with this version. And the bot itself is collecting data on all of the recently announced vulnerabilities. It's collecting exploits, for example. And then it, you know, could very easily recommend to you, well, I found this banner. You don't know about this vulnerability or this exploit because there's so much stuff going on. But I collected it, and I do know about it. So I propose that you use this exploit for this, for example. And then you could just kind of spin it up from there, right? So I suspect this is what we'll see in the future. And with that said, a couple of things. I'll take questions, and also I'm just hoping that everybody will take a moment to collect me on LinkedIn. I'd love to keep in touch. And with that said, any questions, please?
Thank you so much. That was, I'm very lucky that we managed to do the demo, and that was truly impressive. Thank you for that. Thank you, the tech team. Are there any questions? Yes, here on the first row.
Yeah, my question is, so sometimes and quite often, when the output is, for example, table, we as a people, we can consume this information much faster when we see it, not hear it, because sometimes to read, for example, output from Nmap scan, it will take, I don't know, to read it like in the voice and the pace that we saw it, it would take a lot of. So I easily can imagine that someone after working full day like that, so they get just mad and so how you would get over that? So just to speak the essence, understand the essence of the scan, for example, if I say, okay, scan the network, and if there are any Windows hosts, then let me know. Or just let me know the hosts when the I don't know, SQL port is open.
Sure. Like maybe to give you a practical example of how I could see it fitting in, not a past example, but future. I participate. You know, I live in the state of Maryland. I participate in one of the state's CTF teams. And on our team, you know, we have a number of people, and we're communicating in many different ways as we're participating in a CTF, for example. And so in that scenario, we may be sitting next to each other, or some of us might be remote. We might be on like a conference call, or also using Slack or some other, you know, form of comms at the time. So I would expect that my personal opinion of how you would integrate this in is it would, you know, you would give it a name like Tom, and Tom would have access to all those comms channels, and you would speak to it the same way you speak to your coworker, you know. So you would have to develop it over the course of time. But like if I'm the team captain and I have 10 challenges, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, person number 1, go tackle challenge number 1, you know, and provide them with some, they have to have some information that points them to that challenge, and, you know, work to develop this thing to the point where it would be able to engage, roughly speaking, like that. But obviously, what I showed you and that, there's like this distance between the two, you know? But I wouldn't expect to basically sit there all day staring at a blank screen that just like speaks to me, so
yeah.
That would be hard.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
If I may have add to that, I was kind of trying to understand what's the purpose of speaking with the computer, and what came to my mind is accessibility directive, which would actually require to support people visually impaired and so on. Was that in your mind when you built that solution?
Yeah, I mean, so what's in my mind is that I expect that in a few years from now, when you have something approaching an artificial general intelligence, that you will have software that will act similar to how people act, at least, you know, in the digital front, and you will very likely communicate with them in natural language, and they will do things that you ask them to do. So, I mean, I think that we're roughly speaking at the cusp of this. But, you know, OpenAI, for example, released this same capability, but more generically today, right? Like, so today you can go look at their, you know, conversational voice interface with the intention that lots of people are going to build lots of tech that have voice-based interfaces. And there's the video side too, where you will have video avatars that you interact with. So I think the point is that you will have software that looks and feels like a person from all intents and purposes in the virtual world that you will speak to and work with like you work with other people. It's just that, you know, it's some amount of time into the future, you know. I think for me, like the thing that's interesting is if I have a bot that can do 100 things that are useful to me in a pen test scenario or in a CTF scenario, for example, and if I can just quickly slack it in the heat of the moment, I need you to go find a host and do whatever and, you know, try to break into it and tell me when you found a shell. That would be useful to me. I don't know if I would, like, I'm not going to call it on my cell phone probably. I would probably Slack it, you know. But the core of the thing works the same way, and the input and the output is not so much the critical piece, you know. So.
but to me, the most of the beauty when you can give a task to another person is that you don't have to describe the task in detail. Just do it. Yeah, use your intelligence. Wouldn't it be approach that, okay, just on a high level provide a task, and that's up then to this AI specialized tool to do all the possible investigation what human professional would normally do.
There are many workflows, though, that are repetitive. Like, I mean, my argument would be that if you look at the security organization in any normal organization, it always breaks down to the same 10 functions. You have vulnerability management team, a SOC, an IR team, you know, a few other things like that. And if they're at any level of maturity, they've gone down the path of creating standard operating procedures that codify everything that they do. Like, it's rare to see a security team essentially inventing an entirely new style of operation, you know. So I think that, in my opinion, what you would do is if you have a pyramid of complexity, you would build the bottom of that pyramid into a piece of software that you could interact with easily, you know. But, you know, maybe not. I mean, I just think, you know, at the end of the day, if you have something you can email and you can tell it to do things like, you know, go scan my network and send me the results, you know, prioritized by risk, it would be easier to do it by sending it in email in natural language than it would be to, like, do a full integration with all the tooling the way that we've done it traditionally. So, but I guess time will tell, you know, so.
We have a few questions online as well.
Sure.
If I may. So one of them is pretty practical. Like, what happens if the model is, if you ask a model several questions in a row, will it answer all in one go, or just one by one, or something else?
At current point in time, the inputs will be processed serially. It will be serial, all serial. Yeah. Yep.
The second question is, how hard do you envision it might be to integrate the voice emotional part? First of all, to enhance the understanding on how the answer should be made, and also to understand when the requester has actually finished asking the question.
Hard. I do believe that's hard. Yeah, so I mean, I think other folks in bigger shops have done more research on this than I have. But, you know, you have to understand, I think, the language itself in order to understand, as well as, you know, the inflection of the words and things in order to understand when somebody's finished speaking. And that requires, you know, a much more complicated solution than just saying, has there been silence for a certain amount of time, you know? So I have not solved that. I think other people are making progress on that, you know, so challenge to be solved. Yep. So
good luck with the research and all the challenges that will come toward your way, and I'm sure you'll cope with them effectively. And thank you all for, this is a little present for you.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thanks.
Awesome.
Thank you.